Hi, welcome to automateNow. My name is Marco Cruz. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to TestNG, a testing framework. Let's dive in. TestNG was created in 2004 by Cedric Boost. He said he created the tool because he was feeling frustrated with the tool he was using at the time, which was mainly JUnit. TestNG is basically a testing framework that builds on other testing frameworks. This makes it more powerful and easier to use. It is used by software testers and software developers alike. And it can be used for unit, functional, end-to-end, integration testing, and much more. Here we can see some of its key features. The first one is called Annotations. So TestNG uses annotations to let us drive our tests. It makes it easier for us to be able to run our tests in parallel and make them data-driven. TestNG is also widely supported by many popular IDEs. Now let's have a look at the annotations within TestNG. So there are 15 main annotations within TestNG. The first one that we see here is called test. This allows for any method that we write to be treated as a test. Since this video is meant to be just an introduction to TestNG, we're not going to be touching on every single one of these, but only the ones shown in blue on the screen. I mentioned that we have 15 different annotations. Some of these annotations also have what are called attributes. For example, the test annotations has many attributes, some of which are listed on the screen. We could add the description attribute to our test to describe what it is doing. Or we could add the enable attribute and set it to false to disable our tests. We can set the order in which our test will execute by using the priority attribute. Now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at some coding examples. Alright, so I'm going to be using IntelliJ to write a Maven project. So I'm going to go ahead and open up IntelliJ. And here we're going to say new project. Make sure that Maven is selected and click next. And here we give our project a name. And click finish. We can see now that our project has been created, and the first thing that comes up is this pom.xml file. In here we need to specify the TestNG dependencies. So let's head over to the TestNG website and click on this download section. Here you're going to see this dependency. We're going to copy this information and we're going to go back to our project, and in here we're going to say dependencies, and then inside of this we're going to paste the text. Then you're going to see this little box come up that says load Maven changes. Click that, and this is going to import the dependencies into your project. Once we've done that, we're ready to start writing our tests. Alright, so let's begin writing some tests. We're going to go here and expand this, go to the src folder, expand that, go into test, right click on this Java folder, say new Java class. And in here I'm just going to give this class name Smoke Test Suite. Hit enter, and now I'm ready to start writing some tests. So let's write our first test. Remember that we said that in order to write a test, we need to use the test annotation. So we say add and then test and hit enter. Next we write our method, public void smoke test1. And all this test is going to do is print some text to the console. So we say system.out.println, and then we say executing smoke test1. So here's our first test using TestNG. In order to run this test, you can click on this green arrow and say run test. Once this test runs, we can see the text being printed on the console here. Let's write another test. Again, we use add test, and we can see suggestions here. This test is coming from TestNG annotations. So you can just double click that and say public void smoke test2. And if you want to save some typing, you can just say sout in IntelliJ, hit enter, and that's going to save you some typing. And I'm going to say executing smoke test2. Now I showed you how to run this test here by clicking on this arrow next to the method name. We could do the same thing to run this test by clicking on this arrow here. If we want to run all the tests, we go to the class name and click this arrow. and we say run smoke test suite. Once we run that, we can see the output here. We saw that smoke test 1 was followed by smoke test 2. The next annotation I'm going to show you is called before method, and that is going to cause any method that is using that annotation to run before any test method. Let me show you how that works. So let's say here, I'm going to say at before, and then we're going to select method, public void before method. And here you can use any name you want. I'm just using before method, and we're going to print some text as well. Now we said that this annotation is going to cause this method to run before each one of these test methods. So we're going to see this method run once, and then this one's going to run, then this is going to run again, and lastly this one's going to run. So let's see it in action. Let me go ahead and expand this, and here we can see before method being executed, then smoke test 1, and then before method runs again, and then lastly we have smoke test 2. Similar to this before method annotation, we also have an after method annotation. So let's write another test called after method. This is going to cause this method to run after each one of these test methods. Let me go ahead and disable this one for now, and I'm just going to run it like this. So it's going to run this test first, then this is going to run, then this one is going to run, and then lastly this is going to run again. So I'm just going to click this here to run it. And if we look at the output, we see smoke test 1 followed by at the after method, followed by smoke test 2, and lastly after method again. Now if we put it all together and put this back, now we have this before method and the after method. We know that the before method is going to run before these tests, and the after method is going to run after the tests. So let's see. And we see before method, a test, after method. Again, the before method here, another test, and the after method again. So I showed you before method and after method. Similar to before method, we have a before test annotation. So let me go ahead and comment this out here. And I'm going to add a method using before test. And what this is going to do is going to cause whatever method is using this to run before the tests, but it's only going to run once. What I expect to see here is that this method is going to run before these two methods. It will only run once. It's not going to be like this other method, that's before method here, where it was running before each test. Let's go ahead and run it. And as we can see in the output, we only see the before test running once, followed by the two other tests. Similarly, we have an after test annotation. Let's see. After test. So what I expect to see here is that this before test will run first, then these two smoke tests, followed by the after test. Let's go ahead and run it. In the output, we see before test, then smoke test 1, smoke test 2, then after test. And this is as expected. So just to recap here, we said that before method runs before each one of the test methods. Before test only runs once before all the test methods. We also said that the after method annotation causes the method to run after each test method. The after test annotation causes this method to run after all of the test methods have run. So these run multiple times, these only run once. The next annotation we're going to take a look at is called before class. And that's going to cause any method that's using that annotation to run before any other task within that class. So let me go ahead and comment this out for now. And now we only have two tests here. I'm going to add a before class test, before class, So what's going to happen here is that when I execute this suite of tests, this test is going to run first, followed by these other tests. Let's go ahead and run it. And the output shows us that before class ran first, followed by smoke test 1 and smoke test 2. Notice that it doesn't matter what order I use here. If I move this to the end here, and I run this again, I should expect the same results. We see before class is running first. Let me go ahead and undo my changes. Next, we're going to see the after class annotation. Let's go ahead and write another method here. So what's going to happen here is that this after class method is going to run once all of these test methods have run. Here we have the before class is running first, then our test methods, followed by the after class method. Before we look at more annotations, let's take a look at some of the attributes that some of these annotations have. So I'm going to comment this out and only focus on these tests. So the test annotation has some attributes, and in order to add some attributes you use parentheses. The first attribute we're going to take a look at is called enabled. So let's type enabled here, and here we see the options, true or false. So let's say false. So what this is going to do is going to disable this test so that it doesn't run when I run the entire suite of tests. If I go here and I say run smoke test suite, the output only shows smoke test 2 running because this one has been set to enable equal false. We also have another attribute called description. So we're going to say description, and we can say whatever we want here. This test checks that, and whatever you want here. Let's go ahead and add another test here. I'm just going to copy this here and label this 1, 3. When I run this, I expect to see 1, 2, and 3 run in this order. So let's run this, and we see smoke test 1, 2, and 3. The next attribute I want to introduce is called depends on methods. So let's say, for example, that this smoke test 2 depends on method 3. In other words, this test will not get executed until this one has been executed. So I'm going to say here depends on methods, and then in quotes I'm going to say the name of the method that it depends on, smoke test 3. So when this runs, we're going to see smoke test 1. When it comes here, it's going to see that this method is depending on 3, so it's going to execute 3, and then it's going to come back to 2. And we see the output, smoke test 1 run, followed by smoke test 3, and then lastly we have smoke test 2. Another way in which we can affect the order in which our tests run is using the attribute called priority. So in this case, I'm going to go to the first method and say priority, and notice that the default value is called 0. So if I don't specify a priority, it's going to default to 0. So in this case, I'm going to leave this one alone since it's going to be 0, and go to the second method here. And let's say this one, we're going to say priority will be equal to 2, and this other method is going to be priority equal to 1. And when this runs, we're going to see this one running first, then this one, and lastly this one. And we see test 1, test 3, test 2. Another thing I wanted to show you is that notice that we're using the test annotation for each one of these methods. If you have nothing but tests within your class, you can get rid of this here and use the test annotation on your class. And this is going to apply the test annotation to all your methods within this class. If I run this, right-clicking and running the suite, we're going to see that all the tests ran. The next annotation I want to show you is called before suite. But before I do that, let me add some more tests in a different Java class. So I'm going to go back here to my project and right-click here and say new class. And let's pretend that this is a different suite of tests, and this is called regression tests. I'm just going to copy the tests from this other class here and paste them here. And instead of smoke tests, I'm going to label them regression. So now we're pretending that we have two suites of tests. One is called smoke tests, the other one is called regression tests. The next thing I'm going to introduce is something called the testng.xml file. We use the testng.xml file to run tests that may be in different classes or different suites. So we're going to right click on our project name here and say new file and call it testng.xml and hit enter. So the first two lines you're going to see in this file are pretty much standard throughout any testng.xml file. So I already found the two lines and I'm going to paste them here. And all that this references is the type of XML version that we're using in the encoding and the document type, which is a testng suite. So we're going to start with a suite, and the suite needs a name. So in this case, you can give it whatever name you like. Inside suite, we're going to declare test. The test also needs a name, which is also arbitrary. Since our tests lie within classes, we're going to declare that here. I'm going to say classes. Then we're going to declare the class. And the class needs a name. So in this case, we're going to use smoke test. And another class, regression. So by creating this testng.xml file, I can run all of my tests from one place. So here, I'm just going to right click and say run testng.xml. And notice what happens. I'm going to expand this, and we can see here the smoke test 1 ran, then smoke test 2, smoke test 3, and then my regression test 1, 2, and 3. This runs in order here. First, it's going to run this class, all the tests within this class, then all the tests within this class. And we call this a suite of tests. Let's say, for example, that you want this regression test 2 to be run first before the entire suite runs. So we're going to go to this method here, regression test 2, in this class. And here we're going to change this annotation to before suite. Now, when I run this testng.xml file again, we're going to see that that's going to be the first method that's going to get run. And we see here, executing regression test 2, this one here. And then all the other tests run. We could also use after suite. And now this is going to cause this one to run last. And here we see regression test 2 running first, as expected, because here we have labeled that as before suite. Then all of our smoke tests run, followed by regression test 3 here. And lastly, we have this one, regression test 1, because we labeled it after suite. I went ahead and undid my changes here and set this back to regular test. Let's say, for example, that we want to go back to our smoke test. And let's say we only want to run a subset of this test. In this case, I want to run only test number 2. There's a couple of ways I could do this. I could set an attribute and say here, enable equal false for each one of these methods. But another way of doing this is by declaring that in the testng file here. So let me go back here and undo my changes and go to the testng file here. And I'm just going to use smoke test 2. In this case, we're going to go to this class and we're going to add our method underneath this class. And here we say methods and then include and then the method name. Now when I run this, I only expect this method to run from this class, and then all the methods to run from this class. Let's see what happens. And we see here smoke test number 2 got executed. We could also try to exclude a method. In this case, we could say exclude here. And in this case, number 1 and 3 will run, but 2 will not. And here we see the results. Smoke test 1, and then smoke test 2 gets skipped, and then 3 runs, and then all the regression ones run. This has been a brief introduction to testng. There are many other powerful features within this tool, such as making our tests data-driven by using data providers, running our tests in parallel, using reporting capabilities, and much, much more. If you would like to learn more, head on over to the testng website listed in the video description.